we just finish doing?
Yeah, we had to go out in that weather and help somebody pull up an engine. Luckily there was other people than just our boat, but still a bunch of work.
Yeah, we got soaking wet.
And when we came into Boot Cay, we weren't here but just a few days, and of course we rode some pretty strong winds all the way into the anchorage, and we had a really nice sail coming down. But those winds were part of a storm system, and that storm system did get bigger, and eventually it started getting like a little tropical storm out in the Gulf of Mexico. After we'd been here for a few days, the winds were forecast to get up to about 45 knots. So we decided to put out a second anchor. We put out our Fortress. We put it out about 75 feet to the northwest. We had our Bruce out about 75 to 100 feet to the northeast. The anchors dug in really well, and we rode out the storm uneventfully. There were many other people who didn't, and Sam and I spent some time helping those folks. But we rode out the storm just fine with our two anchors. We decided that after the storm was over, the winds were going to continue clocking around to 360 degrees, and we didn't want to tangle our anchors up. So we went ahead and pulled in the Fortress. We did that manually using the winch. We pulled all the line in on the winch, and then we lifted the chain up by hand. But we got it in okay. And then we rode out the other half of these wind changes at 25 to 35 knot winds. This was the first time that we really used our second anchor, and the Fortress dug in something fierce. It held amazingly well.
Well, I was working on the deck all day. Well, time's come once again. It's been the requisite amount of time before we have to clean off the deck again. So this is what I've been doing all morning. I've got this plus some details to get done, a little bit of cleanup. But after we do that, we've got plans to clean up the varnish, put a fresh clear coat on. We're planning on getting this done before we head into the Caribbean. Couple notes on dealing with a teak deck. You almost never, and I know you'll see me a couple times go with the grain, but you almost never go with the grain on a teak deck, because if you go with the grain, it tends to rub away the soft portions and cause a dishing effect, which is not good for the long lasting of the deck. The only times that you tend to see me doing that is when I'm getting around detail points, and if there is a particularly tough area that I can't get to going cross grain.
There's nothing wrong with cleaning your line. When lines get dirty, the particles of dirt actually chafe the internal fibers. The other thing that chafes the internal fibers is salt. So even when you come off from offshore, there's nothing wrong with taking your lines and washing them. This was on the deck, it got rained on, but when you taste it, it's still salty. So we're going to fill this with fresh water, we're going to soak it a little bit, and then dry it out before we put it away.
But what did you do for preparing for our trip to the Bahamas?
We replaced a battery. That AGM battery was 2.5 years old, and it was starting to have problems with the amount of amps needed to start the engine. So we replaced it. I wasn't sure whether it was the starter solenoid or whether it was the battery, but when I put a new battery in, it's really strong. So I think that might have been part of the problem. We shall find out for sure. But in any case, the new battery is much stronger than the old one. And it was 2.5 years. I think the problem was that we were charging it with the same charger that we use to charge our lithium ions. And though it's set for AGM, I think it was being overcharged. And when AGMs are overcharged, a little bit of hydrogen and oxygen are released from the water boiling, and then the battery life goes way down. But it was only a 3-year battery anyway. We made 2.5 years with it, and we used it hard. I'm not particularly surprised that it didn't last. The bilge pump that we put in last year, the one-way valve at the bottom is clogged up. So we're going to try and put a different type of one-way valve on it, or maybe just get a new one. But we'll be working on that tomorrow as well.
On to dinner and the next day.
Yep, on to dinner. looks like we're going to be taking potentially the same route that we took 25 years ago, again, recreating our own path. And in world cruising routes, that's AN113A. AN113A says that the best time to do this is November to mid-December, during the change of seasons. We're going to be going in January, and that's not the time to do it. We tried it in February before, and that was definitely not good. But we're going to try it very early January. But it's on page 128, and it's a worthy read. The route has been called the Thorny Path for a very good reason. The best time to undertake it is at the change of seasons, when the trade winds are lighter and the risk of hurricanes not so great. Another matter of concern, apart from the contrary winds, are the strong currents that occur in this area. These, combined with the numerous reefs, low islands, and few lights, call for accurate navigation at all times. Those who are determined to sail offshore to either the Virgins or the Lesser Antilles, and are confident their boat is capable of it, should gain the open ocean by the quickest way possible and set an easterly course as soon as possible. This avoids the strong northwest current, settings parallel to the Bahamas, and if the winds allow it, the due east course should be held until the longitude of the port of destination is reached and the course is altered to the south. Anyway, that's essentially what we did. We went due east from San Salvador and then south. This time we're going to try and make our way to the Dominican Republic and then on to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. For those who want to do the Thorny Path, there's a book here, Gentleman's Guide to Passages South, 10th edition, The Thornless Path. Anyway, he goes into great detail about how to sail in the islands, how to deal with the weather, and how to get from one point to another without it being as troublesome as World Cruising Route says. So I recommend this book, and we're going to try and follow it. We have some friends that have already used it to work their way down to Long Island. My general plan is to make it to Bimini and check in. From Bimini across the Great Bahama Bank to Chub Key, from Chub Key to Nassau on Providence Island. Then we're going to make our way through to the backside of the Exumas, come down the backside of the Exumas, come to Long Island. From there, we'll go to the Crookeds and on to the DR. We might come up to San Salvador just to say hi, or maybe to Rum Cay before we head south. But rather than have a very, very specific route, because you have to go somewhat where the winds are, I'm going to pick several places where we can get to and multiple routes to get down there.
Well, with all that done, now all we got to do is clean up and put the stuff away. With that said, like, subscribe, comment below any questions, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
I suppose that was to be expected. I can't.
Didn't last.
We've got a couple things to get done tomorrow at least. We've got spot checking and a little bit more. We've got to put the anchor away and determine whether we're using the anchor or not.